The old man, who always wore a scowl, as if the whole world owed him something, was Mr. Rivera, a literature professor known for his hot temper. That day, he was grading his university students' exams. The large number of failing scores and poorly written answers only made him frown even more. The next day, he taught his class as usual. He returned the students' exam papers so they could review their mistakes and learn from them before the next test. A female student with long hair suddenly complained to Mr. Rivera. She asked why he had given her such a low grade. She even boasted that she was a popular TikTok creator and threatened to expose him on social media if he did not raise her grade. She was convinced that the professor would not want to be criticized by the public. But she had threatened the wrong person. Mr. Rivera did not care about her threats. He bluntly told her that what she had written on the exam was shallow and worthless. After saying that, he simply walked away. The students' friends could only shake their heads and say that she should never have argued with the professor. Mr. Rivera was known as a failed writer. Throughout his entire career, he had published only one book. He deeply hated his own failure, but instead of confronting it, he took out his anger, jealousy, and resentment on his students. That failure could never be erased, and the people who knew him only pitied him even more. When he returned to his office, he found Thomas waiting for him. Thomas had come to talk about the school's upcoming press conference for an academic exchange program. They had invited the renowned writer Christopher, who had once been Mr. Rivera's closest friend. Because of this, Thomas wanted Mr. Rivera to represent their school and speak with Christopher. The moment he heard that name, painful memories from the past came rushing back. Although they had once been close friends, they eventually went their separate ways. Back when he was just starting out as a writer, he had asked Christopher to review his manuscript and write its foreword. However, Christopher refused because he was busy with his own work. He also criticized Mr. Rivera's writing, causing him to lose even more confidence in his own abilities. The following day, he taught another class at the university. While discussing a literary work, one student was doing something else instead of paying attention to the lesson. Feeling disrespected, he immediately ordered the student to leave the classroom. But another student stood up and stopped his outburst. The student corrected the professor's mistake regarding the two characters in the story, Andrew and William. He explained that in the original story, Walter had written to William, not Andrew, contrary to what the professor had said. Walter was caught in a love triangle with Andrew and Charlotte, causing his feelings of admiration, jealousy, and self-doubt to become intertwined. Mr. Rivera felt as though he had been slapped across the face. It seemed as if all the dignity he had spent years building had vanished in an instant. In a single moment, his reputation had been ruined by nothing more than a student. He did not let it go. He looked into the students' records and learned that his name was Alden. From then on, he paid close attention to every exam and every assignment that Alden submitted. One of Alden's writings was a story about his friendship with Arjo. The two unexpectedly met at a coffee shop, where Alden worked as a waiter. One day, Alden accidentally picked up Arjo's cell phone. Instead of keeping it or slipping it into his pocket, he immediately returned it to its rightful owner. Arjo thanked him. That was the first time Alden noticed the woman who was with Arjo inside the coffee shop. Later on, fate brought them together again in the programming club. Because Alden had extensive knowledge in that field, he helped Arjo. From then on, they became close friends and were almost inseparable. Mr. Rivera read Alden's story and was immediately captivated by its simple yet deeply engaging scenes. As time passed, he secretly observed Alden and the direction that each of his stories was taking. Eventually, Alden took advantage of his close friendship with Arjo and the opportunity to ride in his car so he could visit their house. There, he discovered that the woman he had first seen was his friend's mother. Even though she was already a mother, she still looked remarkably young. Whenever she stood beside Arjo, they looked more like siblings than mother and son. Alden always kept his distance and quietly observed from afar. He also secretly wandered around the house and noticed a photograph of the four family members. In the picture, the woman wore a bright smile, and the happiness of their complete and joyful family was unmistakable. Without realizing it, Alden smiled as well. He admired them and, at the same time, envied Arjo for having such a happy and complete family. That evening, Mr. Rivera brought Alden's story home for his wife, Victoria, to read. She praised Alden's writing skills, but she could not understand his true purpose for getting close to Arjo's family. Mr. Rivera noticed that he and Alden shared a similar writing style. They both enjoyed incorporating many psychological elements into their stories. Victoria assumed that her husband intended to take Alden under his wing as his protege. After their conversation, Mr. Rivera returned to his room. The couple had been sleeping in separate rooms for a long time, so they were now more like housemates living under the same roof. The following day, Mr. Rivera taught his class as usual. After class, he asked Alden to stay behind so they could speak privately. Meanwhile, Arjo waited outside for a while before heading home on his own. The professor asked Alden whether he was jealous of Arjo. Alden was surprised but pleased because, at last, someone had understood his complicated and conflicted feelings. He even wondered to himself whether it was wrong to feel jealous of his closest friend. Alden thought the professor would tell him to stop writing, but the opposite happened. Instead, Mr. Rivera encouraged him to continue writing and offered to tutor him privately so he could broaden his knowledge even further. Unfortunately, Alden declined because his family was struggling financially, and he needed to work to support his education. Nevertheless, the professor told him to think carefully about the offer, explaining that the additional lessons would help him learn more and make his stories even better and more compelling. In the end, Alden decided to quit one of his part-time jobs, so he would have time for the extra lessons. When he arrived at Mr. Rivera's house, Victoria was delighted because it had been a long time since she had seen her husband so full of energy. He had once seemed trapped in a repetitive life, but now it was as though he had come alive again after finding a student he truly admired. Mr. Rivera personally prepared the study materials and lesson plans. He eagerly waited for Alden until he was almost out of patience. But when the student finally arrived, he immediately noticed from Alden's face that he had lost all hope. He sensed that something bad had happened, and he was right. Alden told him that he was planning to drop out of school. Earlier that day, there had been an incident in Arjo's garage, and now the tension between him and Arjo was stronger than ever. The professor first calmed him down and asked him to explain everything that had happened. Alden and Arjo were working together in the programming club for a competition. Alden went to his friend's house to study. While looking for the bathroom, his curiosity got the better of him, and he secretly entered Arjo's mother's bedroom. There, he secretly smelled his friend's mother's clothes. He was caught by Arjo's mother herself. Alden explained that he had simply gotten lost while looking for the bathroom. Outside the room, however, the woman acted as though nothing had happened. That evening, Alden was introduced to Arjo's father. They all had dinner together as a family. Later that night, while the couple was talking, Alden accidentally overheard their conversation. He learned that Arjo's mother did not want her son to continue associating with a boy like him. However, Arjo's father thought differently. He wanted to take advantage of Alden's talent to improve his son's academic performance because he believed that success in programming competitions would help him find a good job more easily. Alden said that if he and Arjo failed to win the competition, they would no longer be able to visit Arjo's house. And if they could no longer go there, where else would they find the material and inspiration for their writing? In the end, Alden came up with a cunning idea. He asked Mr. Rivera to help him steal a test paper. Mr. Rivera was furious. He was almost beside himself with anger. So he immediately threw Alden out of the house and forbade him from ever returning. After that, Alden stopped submitting stories and exam papers altogether. Even though he was threatened with failing the course, he still came to class the following day. When Mr. Rivera came face to face with the renowned writer Christopher, he felt tremendous pressure. They had graduated from the same university, but while Christopher had become a celebrated author, he had remained an ordinary professor. During the event, he highly praised the new direction of Christopher's writing, especially his use of detective elements, which readers greatly enjoyed. Mr. Rivera even made up a story about a student who had supposedly asked Christopher whether he was running out of ideas and had therefore needed to stitch different parts of the story together. Christopher immediately realized that the story was completely fabricated. Even so, Christopher confidently said that he continued to improve every work he wrote and promised to bring even more new ideas and enjoyment to his readers. That evening, the school staff invited Christopher to a dinner. While everyone was busy praising the famous writer, Mr. Rivera seemed to go completely unnoticed. Irritated, he stepped outside to get some fresh air. He never expected to find Alden there, who was also working part-time at the same place. Alden shared that he wanted to enter his first literary writing competition. Mr. Rivera knew that Alden possessed extraordinary talent, but he believed that Alden had not yet fully expressed his abilities through every word he wrote. In his opinion, if Alden entered a competition right away, it would be as though he were showing off in front of experienced writers. That night, Mr. Rivera dreamed that Alden had won the competition. After the award ceremony, Alden even introduced him as his mentor, which filled the professor with immense joy. The following day, he decided to speak with Alden in private. He offered to help him obtain a copy of the programming exam from Thomas in exchange for attending his additional literature classes. At lunchtime that same day, Mr. Rivera immediately went to see Thomas in the cafeteria. He lied, saying that he needed help converting the attendance system from a manual process to an automated one. When Thomas opened the computer, the professor suddenly pretended to be having a heart attack. Concerned, Thomas hurried to get the professor's medicine from his car. As soon as Thomas left, Mr. Rivera quickly copied the file containing the programming exam onto his USB drive. Since it was the first time he had committed such a serious wrongdoing, his hands trembled with anxiety. Thomas quickly went down to the parking garage and returned in just 5 minutes. Within that short time, the professor had to search through countless files on the computer, find the correct document, and immediately back it up onto his USB drive. As the progress bar slowly moved forward, it felt as though his chest was tightening with fear. Fortunately, by the time Thomas returned, he had finished copying the file and had erased every trace of what he had done. He pretended that he was feeling better, thanked Thomas, and then quickly ran away for the area. He looked like an athlete who had suddenly regained his strength despite being old and physically weak. It was the first time he had done something wrong and gotten away with it, and his emotions became a tangled mix. He felt as though he was slowly losing himself. He knew that what he had done was enough to destroy his career completely and bury him in lifelong disgrace. A few days later, Mr. Rivera seemed like a completely different person. After experiencing the strange thrill of breaking the law, his lectures became livelier, more passionate, and more engaging, much to the delight of his students. When the results of the programming contest were released, Alden intentionally answered a few questions incorrectly so that he would earn only enough points to advance to the next round. He did not want to take away the opportunity from those who had genuinely worked hard for the competition. To him, winning would not be fair if he already knew the answers before taking the exam. Mr. Rivera was deeply impressed by the integrity that Alden had shown. Alden also shared that Arjo's family had invited him to dinner at their home to thank him for helping their son earn high grades. Because of everything that had happened, he found the inspiration to continue writing his story once again. That evening, Alden went to Arjo's house, and they all had dinner together as a family. However, he quickly realized that another major challenge awaited him. Like many mothers, Arjo's mother was naturally overprotective of her son. During dinner, Arjo's mother asked him one question after another about his background, as though she were investigating every aspect of his life. Alden felt that he needed to reveal his circumstances, so he explained that his mother had abandoned him when he was a child. His father had turned to alcohol after being left by his wife and had eventually ended up in a nursing home. Arjo's entire family felt sorry for his situation. They admired how hard he worked, juggling several part-time jobs to pay for both his education and his daily living expenses. Despite all his hardships, he remained hardworking and optimistic. He believed that although no one could choose where they came from, they could change their future through perseverance. That night, Victoria secretly read Alden's exam. She was shocked to discover that her husband had secretly helped Alden with a programming test. To her, it was an extremely serious violation of a teacher's ethics. Mr. Rivera became furious when his wife questioned him. Their argument ended with bitterness between them. However, it did not take long for him to regret his behavior. Around midnight, he looked for Victoria to apologize. He admitted that after stealing the exam questions for Alden, he had experienced a strange sense of happiness. Perhaps it was the first time he had ever felt that he was living according to his own desires after spending more than half of his life bound by rules and expectations. Victoria also noticed the positive changes taking place in her husband's mindset. Without realizing it, Mr. Rivera was slowly growing close to his wife once again. It had also been a long time since they had shared the same bed. Many years had passed since their last failed artificial insemination. Because they never had a child, they gradually drifted apart. They began sleeping in separate rooms and no longer shared the same blanket or pillow. Their home had become like a prison, and their marriage had become nothing more than the lives of two shadows living under the same roof. But now, everything had changed. Little by little, they began opening their hearts to each other again. The following morning, Victoria went downstairs to the kitchen to prepare a snack and brought it to her husband's study. She wanted Alden to see the warm and happy relationship she and her husband shared. However, Mr. Rivera seemed unwilling to let Alden see his wife. He repeatedly told Victoria to leave the room. A short while later, Alden arrived carrying 3 red roses. The married couple immediately froze. Mr. Rivera remembered that only a few days earlier, Alden had given Arjo's mother 3 white roses. Now he had brought 3 red roses instead. Didn't he know that roses symbolized love? Because of this, Mr. Rivera became even more alarmed. He feared that a wolf was slowly making its way into his home. Once again, he asked Alden whether the emotions written in his story were his genuine feelings or merely fiction. Alden replied that he did not know whether there was any rule stating that the narrator also had to be the author. After that, Alden brought out the old novel written by Mr. Rivera, which he had purchased from a second-hand bookstore. The story was about a young man who met 12 women at different stages of his life. Alden asked whether the professor had truly experienced everything he had written. In his opinion, if it were true, the professor must have had an incredibly vast heart to hold such immense love. Mr. Rivera clarified that everything in the novel was fictional. He explained that the 12 women in the story were actually the same person, changing through different stages of her life, like a sunny morning and a rainy afternoon, yet never becoming a storm. Afterward, Alden shared the news that Arjo's family had agreed to let him live in their house. He was overjoyed because he would be able to save money on rent and other living expenses. He also sincerely thanked Arjo's father for convincing his wife to welcome him into their home. Mr. Rivera noticed how innocent Alden still was. In his opinion, the young man was easily dazzled by even the smallest acts of kindness shown to him. He believed that Arjo's father was merely using Alden as a free tutor for his own son. For that reason, he advised Alden that if he was going to live in Arjo's house, he needed to maintain a good relationship with the entire family, especially the head of the household. After that, Mr. Rivera and Victoria went to the supermarket to do some shopping. Victoria knew that her husband was jealous because Alden praised Arjo's father more than he praised him. He advised her to get along well with the student as well. Victoria also made an effort to be kind to Alden so that he would naturally respect her. She even complimented the young man's good looks, which only irritated Mr. Rivera even more. He had nothing to say and quietly went home. As Victoria reflected on everything that had happened, she felt that Alden seemed familiar, but she could not remember where she had seen him before. Meanwhile, Mr. Rivera could not stop thinking about what his wife had said. He feared that because of Alden's deep loneliness and troubled state of mind, the day might come when he would completely cross the line. That night, he dreamed that Alden had murdered Arjo's entire family. The nightmare terrified him. The following day, as planned, Alden moved into Arjo's family home. Everyone welcomed him warmly. He happily interacted with the family, and while they were eating, Arjo's older sibling even called to welcome him. Everything was going well until their housekeeper, Megan, arrived. She was constantly irritable and always seemed to be looking for a reason to pick a fight with Alden because she looked down on his background as someone who had once lived in a shanty. Megan even secretly left a cigarette but in the bathroom and tried to blame it on Alden. Fortunately, Arjo's mother noticed the lipstick mark on the end of the cigarette, so she realized that Alden was not responsible. Arjo's mother also strictly forbade Megan from smoking in the garden because it was not good for Arjo. However, as soon as she left, the housekeeper immediately returned to the habit. Alden witnessed everything but chose to remain silent. That evening, Arjo's mother told her husband about the housekeeper's strange behavior. She said that if she did not feel sorry for Megan as a struggling single mother, she would have dismissed her long ago. Her husband comforted her and said that if she truly no longer wanted Megan working there, they should simply give her some money and let her leave on good terms so she would no longer be a problem. He even helped massage his wife's feet and neck. From a staircase, Alden quietly watched the sweet interaction between the married couple. To him, it was even more enjoyable to watch than romantic movies. A little later, the couple remembered that someone else was still in the house, so the woman pulled her husband into their bedroom to continue their private moment. Alden remained outside the door and listened from outside for several minutes before finally deciding to go upstairs to his room. When Mr. Rivera learned about this, he gave Alden a stern lecture. He told him that what he had done was an invasion of other people's privacy. He deliberately raised his voice so his wife, who was outside the room, could hear him. After Victoria left, the professor lowered his voice and told Alden that if he truly wanted to observe people for his writing, it was enough to watch them from a distance. He should never listen to their private conversations because he might get caught. Alden once again asked about the professor's married life, but Mr. Rivera refused to discuss the subject. A few days later, Victoria bought fast food for the students whom her husband was teaching. She knew that Alden had many questions about love, sexuality, and adult life, so she wanted Mr. Rivera to guide him more closely so that he would not lose his way. While they were eating, Alden complimented Victoria's beauty and told her that she did not need to go on a diet. When Mr. Rivera heard that, he could not hide his jealousy over the compliment his student had given his wife. Alden knew that Mr. Rivera was not good at expressing his feelings. He said that the professor loved his wife very much and had even written a book about her. Mr. Rivera ran outside, but it was already too late. Alden believed that the professor's wife was the woman in the story, while Victoria believed that the woman was her husband's former love. Everything quickly descended into chaos. Even if Mr. Rivera had 10 mouths, he still would not have been able to calm his wife. Because of the troublesome student Alden, he did not even realize that his teacher's home had already been set ablaze. The following day, Megan and the lady of the house argued once again. Arjo's mother discovered that her branded scarf was missing and assumed that Megan had taken it. She personally searched Megan's bag. Megan insisted that she had not stolen anything and was deeply insulted by what had happened. Because of that, she immediately decided to quit her job. Arjo's mother suddenly felt tightness in her chest. Arjo quickly ran to get his mother's medicine, while his father chased after Megan to speak with her. To Mr. Rivera, Alden had gone too far. He could clearly see that the young man was slowly being consumed by anger. To get revenge on Megan, Alden himself had placed the scarf inside her bag so she would be accused of theft. To Mr. Rivera, it was a serious violation of right and wrong. If that happened, where would Megan go? How would she support and provide for her child? Mr. Rivera scolded Alden for constantly causing trouble. It was only then that Alden learned that the professor and his wife had argued because of him. As a result, they had to hold their lessons in the professor's office instead of at the couple's home. To ease his teacher's stress, Alden shared a funny incident. That was when he discovered the unusual relationship between Arjo's father and Megan. He secretly followed them and found them meeting in a parking lot. There, the car shook as though it were caught in an earthquake. Alden was amazed, as though he had won the lottery. But Mr. Rivera was deeply disappointed in him. To the professor, Alden's behavior had become indecent and was hurting other people. Aside from seeking personal revenge, he had begun secretly spying on the private lives of others. He also had no solid evidence and was relying only on his own assumptions. Alden might have believed that he had uncovered a major secret, but he was still too young to understand what could happen. If it was all just a misunderstanding and everything came to light, 2 families could be destroyed because of him. The following morning, Mr. Rivera went to his wife's room. He told her that Alden was beyond saving and that he intended to stop teaching him. That night, the professor dreamed about Alden once again. In the dream, Alden was carrying a hammer and entered their house to settle the problem. He woke up to the sound of the telephone ringing. When he woke from the nightmare, it was Alden calling. He said that he had been in an accident and needed someone to stay with him. The first person who came to Alden's mind was his respected teacher, Mr. Rivera. In the end, the professor had no choice but to get up and drive to him. However, when he arrived, he was shocked to find that the student was perfectly fine. Alden had only done it to prove that he was not lying. He said that he had seen Arjo's father and Megan enter a hotel together. Because Mr. Rivera felt that he had been deceived, he became furious. He had sacrificed his precious sleeping time only to be toyed with by his student. He therefore declared that from that moment on, their relationship as teacher and student was over. Each of them should go their separate ways. After that, a sudden accident occurred that deeply shocked both of them. The victim was Megan. Alden showed the professor that Arjo's father was also nearby. Mr. Rivera was stunned to discover that Arjo's father was none other than the writer Christopher. The world truly was a small place. Even in a narrow alley, people met when they least expected it. Both Mr. Rivera and Alden were too shocked to recover. They had thought they were simply carrying out an exciting secret surveillance, but they never expected to become witnesses to an accident. As Alden returned to Arjo's house, he and the professor remained silent. Neither of them spoke a single word. When they arrived, Alden said goodbye and was about to get out of the car, but Mr. Rivera stopped him. He questioned why Alden had hidden the identity of Arjo's father. It was only then that Alden learned that his friend's father was the famous writer Christopher. After returning home, Mr. Rivera still could not recover from the shock. He began taking out the stories that Alden had written, and each one felt like a sharp blade cutting deeply into his heart while rubbing salt into the wound. That was when he realized that Christopher's wife had been Mr. Rivera's first love. She was also the main character in the only novel he had ever written. Mr. Rivera had failed in both love and his career. In every aspect of life, he had always lost to Christopher. Mr. Rivera was filled with rage. Why had Christopher betrayed the woman he regarded as a goddess? Why, after finally winning her heart, had he failed to cherish her? The following morning, Mr. Rivera still had to go to school and teach as usual. Once again, his class became gloomy and lifeless. As always, Alden sat at the back of the classroom, paying no attention to the lesson. After class, Mr. Rivera pulled him into the office to talk. Alden was shocked to learn that Megan had died from the accident. He asked the professor whether he knew Christopher's family, but the professor lied about their relationship. Alden already knew the truth because Arjo himself had told him that Mr. Rivera had looked after Christopher during the school's recent press conference. Alden explained that he had written the story in his exam and had already submitted it. It was his final story because Mr. Rivera himself had canceled their extra classes. After receiving the story that Alden had written about him, Mr. Rivera could not resist opening it and reading it. Alden was deeply disappointed in Arjo's father. He had never expected him to have such a deceptive double life. In Christopher's family, it was as though nothing had happened after Megan's accident. The next day, because Megan could no longer be reached, Natalie had to cook for the family by herself. Christopher even blamed Megan for being irresponsible, saying that she had suddenly quit without informing them, even though he knew she was in the hospital emergency room. Alden witnessed all of this and quietly smirked as he observed everything that was happening. After that, the police called to report the tragic news about Megan. Natalie and their son Arjo were both shocked when they heard it. Arjo was so overwhelmed that he had difficulty breathing, forcing them to call a private doctor for emergency assistance. Meanwhile, Christopher remained calm after his son fainted. To him, his son was simply too weak to lose consciousness over something like that. Natalie blamed herself deeply because she believed that Megan's accident had happened after she dismissed her. Everyone mourned the housekeeper's death. But Christopher, the man who had betrayed his family, seemed almost happy. Alden even noticed his sinister smile, as though a great burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Mr. Rivera became deeply disgusted by Christopher's behavior, so he went to Alden's workplace to speak with him. The professor admitted that he had canceled their extra classes because of his impulsive temper, but now that his anger had subsided, he regretted his decision. Alden was overjoyed to return to class. He still wanted to continue writing stories about that family, which was slowly beginning to fall apart. Alden knew that Mr. Rivera had once been close to Christopher, so he was certain that the professor was hurting because his former friend had strayed from the right path. However, this was not the time to let emotions take over or allow personal feelings to interfere with everything. As a teacher, Mr. Rivera knew that he had to be a source of moral support for his student during this crisis. Mr. Rivera had a strong suspicion about Megan's death, so he instructed Alden to investigate any possible clues related to the crime. That evening, Mr. Rivera returned home and wanted to reconcile with his wife. However, because he was not good with words, everything he said came across as rather blunt and harsh. He invited Victoria to go on a date and watch a movie. Instead of choosing a romantic film, the professor picked a horror movie. Victoria became so frightened that she burst into tears. Mr. Rivera took advantage of the moment to hold his wife's hand and comfort her. After the movie, they went to a restaurant for the second part of their date with Thomas and his wife. While they were eating, Mr. Rivera could not sit still because he was waiting for a message from Alden about the investigation. Thomas's wife remembered Mr. Rivera's and Victoria's failed artificial insemination more than 10 years earlier. She even criticized Mr. Rivera, saying that he had been heartless for leaving his wife to suffer alone after they failed to have a child. When Mr. Rivera received the message, he hurriedly ran to the restroom to read it. Meanwhile, Victoria assumed that her husband had been embarrassed by what Thomas's wife had said. Hurt by the situation, she went to the restroom to cry. From the message, Mr. Rivera learned that Alden had already arrived at the crime scene. However, the cleaners had already washed away the bloodstains outside the hotel, forcing him to go inside and ask questions. Because of the hotel's policy regarding guest privacy, the staff refused to provide any information. Alden did not give up. He secretly entered the building and questioned every hotel employee, from the janitor to the security guard. However, he failed to obtain any useful information. Eventually, the hotel manager spotted him and reminded him that unauthorized people were not allowed inside, so he immediately ordered him to leave. However, the manager suddenly recognized Alden and called him back. It turned out that they had known each other for a long time when they had both worked as construction workers. They had not seen each other for a year, so they had a lot to catch up on. Alan had failed his exams and ended up working as the hotel manager, even though it was not the career he wanted. Meanwhile, Alden had been fortunate enough to get into the university he had long dreamed of attending. Alan told him that he had witnessed Megan and Christopher arguing. Christopher and Megan argued and grabbed each other. Megan seemed to be threatening Christopher, but a serious accident suddenly occurred, leaving Alan unable to do anything. According to Alan, Christopher was a regular guest at the hotel. He visited several times a week and always stayed in the presidential suite. He regularly ordered expensive bottles of wine and discounted ice cream. His room was always filled with different kinds of women's underwear. That was simply how wealthy people lived, Alan said. Christopher even lied to his wife, claiming that he was traveling to find inspiration for his writing. Not even in her dreams did Natalie know that he was actually enjoying himself at the hotel with other women. Alan was always nearby listening. Whenever there was even the slightest noise coming from Christopher's room, he noticed it. But one day, he heard something unusual. While Mr. Rivera was reading that thrilling part of the story, Victoria and Thomas called him. They said they had unexpectedly run into Christopher and had invited him over for a conversation. Because he was suddenly face to face with the person he least wanted to see, Mr. Rivera treated Christopher coldly. During their conversation, whether intentionally or not, Christopher mentioned his wife in front of Mr. Rivera and Victoria. As a result, Victoria learned that Christopher was the rival who had stolen her husband's first love. Mr. Rivera asked Christopher where he found inspiration for his writing. Christopher brushed it off by saying that he traveled to many places to gather inspiration. However, Mr. Rivera knew that although Christopher did enjoy traveling, he never had a clear itinerary. As the tension continued to rise, Victoria stepped in to calm everyone down. But Mr. Rivera was hurt when his wife remarked that he seemed to be suffering from writer's block and needed to learn from Christopher's experiences. Because of that, the couple had a fierce argument. Victoria believed that the professor had hidden the truth about his past relationship. Meanwhile, Mr. Rivera was angry because his wife did not know Christopher's true character. But since he had never told her the truth, how could she possibly have known? Afterward, he returned to his room and continued reading Alden's story. Alan had heard the argument inside Christopher's room. The woman said that she had evidence and threatened to expose all of Christopher's wrongdoing. She also mentioned that, the previous day, a young man about Alden's age had come to investigate. He did not know exactly what had happened, but Megan's death might have been intentional. At that time, Christopher and Megan had been arguing. Only moments later, she was involved in the accident, and Christopher was nearby, trembling with fear. Mr. Rivera became disoriented. It was as though he himself had been at the hotel that night, hearing and witnessing the argument between Christopher and Megan. Then it felt as though he had been transported to the parking lot. As Megan's ghost slowly approached him, Mr. Rivera broke into a heavy sweat in the middle of his nightmare. He felt that he had to find a way to help Megan escape her situation, or at least ease his own feelings of helplessness and guilt. He immediately called Alden. It took a long time before Alden answered. Mr. Rivera's thoughts were in complete disarray, and he stammered as he spoke. He ordered Alden to find the other young man immediately and uncover the evidence surrounding Megan's suspicious death. That night, Arjo was alone in his room. His thoughts were in complete turmoil, and he was utterly confused. Suddenly, he tore apart the story his father had given him. At that moment, all of his trust in his respected father completely collapsed. Arjo called his older sister and told her that their father had been unfaithful. It was also revealed that he himself had become suspicious of the housekeeper's behavior, which was why he had gone to the hotel to investigate. Mr. Rivera argued that they could not rely solely on a crumpled book as proof that Arjo's emotional instability stemmed from discovering that his father might have killed someone. Alden did not accept his teacher's conclusion. He continued presenting more evidence. Ever since the housekeeper disappeared, Arjo had become depressed and had lost interest in life. He no longer smiled happily. He spent the entire day locked inside his playroom. Even when Alden went in to call him for dinner, Arjo simply scolded him. Arjo's mother believed that her son was merely grieving because the housekeeper had been involved in an accident. However, Arjo's father could not accept the fact that one person was missing from the dinner table. So he went upstairs and dragged his son downstairs to eat. Arjo could not say a word in front of his father. That only made Alden even more suspicious. He noticed something unusual about the relationship between father and son, especially whenever they sat together at the dinner table. He always caught Arjo glaring at his father. When Arjo's mother mentioned that she wanted to work with a church volunteer group to help raise funds for Megan's funeral, Christopher immediately objected. He did not want the matter to become widely known or attract other people's attention. He said that they would simply pay for the funeral themselves, since Megan had worked for their family for many years. After hearing that, Arjo lost his appetite and immediately returned to his room. When Mr. Rivera heard the story, he was deeply disappointed with the way Christopher was handling the situation. In his eyes, Christopher was merely pretending to be kind in order to hide the truth about his infidelity. Alden added that Arjo was quiet and withdrawn at home, but once he arrived at school, he returned to his usual personality. He became cheerful and friendly again, and even played basketball with his friends. Mr. Rivera told Alden that he needed to return to the hotel to search for more clues. He was certain that Arjo had discovered his father's secret. With the help of an elderly acquaintance, Alden obtained the hotel's security camera footage. From it, he confirmed that the man who had arrived at the hotel before him had a silhouette that looked remarkably similar to Arjo's. Mr. Rivera said that from that point on, Alden only needed to uncover the secrets Arjo was hiding for his father. That way, they would uncover Christopher's dark story. Alden admitted that he had once envied Arjo, but now he was relieved to discover that Arjo's family was not as perfect as he had imagined. He knew he should not feel that way, so he decided to help Arjo break free from his father. Alden also mentioned that Arjo's older sister, Susie, would be coming home that Sunday because it was Christopher's birthday. Since the siblings were very close, Alden secretly listened to their conversations in hopes of finding another clue. When Sunday finally arrived, Alden pretended to be a fan of Susie's books so he could ask for her autograph. That was how they began to grow closer. Even though it was Christopher's birthday, he was still preoccupied with the housekeeper's funeral arrangements. When Susie heard that her mother also wanted to attend Megan's funeral, she immediately became angry and refused to let her go, as though the place were filthy and disgusting. When Arjo came downstairs, Alden noticed the mysterious exchange of glances between the siblings. The siblings exchanged glances as though they were hiding a secret. They waited until their mother entered the kitchen before immediately heading to the library to talk. Alden secretly followed them and squeezed himself into a corner to listen. There, he learned that Arjo's older sister already knew about their father's relationship with the housekeeper. According to her, their father always had an excuse whenever the subject came up. The siblings desperately wanted to tell their mother everything about their father's wrongdoing, but Arjo stopped her. Arjo explained that a tragedy had happened in the past that had devastated their mother and had nearly driven her to death because of severe depression. If she were to learn now about their father's affair with another woman, she might not be able to bear it. Nevertheless, Arjo continued speaking. He said that the housekeeper had not died in a simple accident. She had been killed by their father. That was exactly what Alden had been hoping to hear. But at that very moment, the siblings heard their mother calling for them, so they quickly left. Meanwhile, their mother found Alden in the library and immediately confronted him about the cake he had made for her husband. After finishing what he was doing, Alden hurried to the basement. By then, the siblings had already revealed half of the truth. At first, they had believed that the housekeeper had simply been involved in an accident that night, so Arjo had followed her to the hospital to investigate. It was only there that they discovered she had actually been assaulted. Arjo's older sister was deeply shocked when she learned the truth. However, she immediately warned her brother never to tell anyone about it. She feared that if their father became involved in a case concerning someone's death, the reputation he had spent years building would be destroyed, and her own career would also suffer, because she would be known as the daughter of a murderer. Because of their father's fame as a writer, his works became the subject of even more public discussion. Alden gradually began to understand why Arjo had started isolating himself in his room. More than anything else, Arjo loved his mother and hated his father. But he could not bring himself to reveal the whole truth because he could not save his mother from the turmoil caused by carrying their father's family name. Even Mr. Rivera fell silent after learning the family secret. He wanted to save his first love from the demon that was Christopher. He also wanted the entire academic community to know that Christopher was an immoral and corrupt man. To accomplish that, they first had to find a way to persuade Arjo to tell the truth about what had happened on the night of the accident. Alden suggested that they reveal part of the truth to Arjo's mother so she would begin to suspect something and question her son. Since Arjo loved his mother dearly, he surely would not be able to hide everything from her. However, Mr. Rivera immediately rejected the idea. He feared that if she learned the whole truth, she would be completely shattered. After class, Mr. Rivera returned home and noticed that his first love was on campus. He could not stop himself from following her, even though they had not seen each other for a long time. Her appearance still reminded him of the past. As he drove, he could not stop himself from following her like a stalker. In his quiet and uneventful life, seeing that woman again was enough to make his heart race once more. The first and only novel he had ever written had been inspired by his feelings for her. Eventually, he realized that she had only come to the campus to visit her husband. Mr. Rivera could not accept that reality. To him, the woman he had regarded as the brightest moon in his life had been completely taken away by Christopher. Because of his overwhelming love for her, he had grown distant from his own wife. That night, he continued receiving updates from Alden. Alden reported that Christopher's family had received a letter. It had no sender's name, but it was clearly intended for Christopher. After reading the letter, Christopher was visibly shaken. His hands trembled so badly that he dropped and shattered an expensive bottle of wine. Overcome by suspicion, Alden secretly entered Christopher's office to search for the letter. However, Christopher suddenly returned, forcing Alden to hide behind a bookshelf. From there, he watched Christopher open the letter again, read it once more, and then feed it into a paper shredder to destroy it completely. Afterward, Christopher even walked over to the very bookshelf where Alden was hiding to retrieve a book. Fortunately, Alden remained unnoticed. After Christopher left, Alden gathered the shredded pieces of paper and brought them back to his room. Piece by piece, he carefully put them back together until the entire letter was restored. From it, he learned that someone was keeping a video from a hospital and was inviting Christopher to meet at 10 o'clock that night by the fountain in the park. Both Mr. Rivera and Alden suspected that Arjo had sent the letter. Their suspicion was strengthened when both Christopher and Arjo mentioned during dinner that they would be going out at 10 o'clock that night. Because of this, Alden secretly made his way to the park as well. Alden searched for the highest spot in the park so he could clearly see the entire area. From there, he saw Christopher approaching the fountain, while on the opposite side, a shadowy figure was also secretly making its way toward the meeting place. Meanwhile, Mr. Rivera was at home, anxiously waiting for news. It was already past 1 o'clock in the morning when Alden finally arrived. He immediately wanted to tell the professor about the shocking discovery he had made. To avoid alerting his wife, Mr. Rivera quickly ushered him into his study. Alden revealed that the shadow he had seen meeting Christopher was not Arjo, but Arjo's mother. Both Alden and Mr. Rivera were stunned by the revelation. They realized that Arjo's mother was not as innocent as they had believed. Instead, she knew more about everything that had happened than anyone else. The person they had seen going to the hotel was not Arjo, as they had first assumed, but his mother. Arjo's mother was equally shocked to learn that Alden already knew so much about their family. At first, she assumed that he merely wanted to ask her for money. But when Alden explained that his only intention was to help his closest friend, Arjo, he began recounting the truth in detail. However, before he could tell Mr. Rivera everything, he received a phone call. After answering it, he suddenly became uneasy. The professor urged him to continue his story, but he refused and said that he needed to go home. The following day, Mr. Rivera could not settle down. He was unable to concentrate on teaching. He repeatedly checked his phone and occasionally glanced toward the back of the classroom, but Alden was nowhere to be seen. Only Arjo was there. After thinking it over carefully, he decided not to ask any questions so that Arjo would not become suspicious. By lunchtime, Mr. Rivera was still waiting for Alden's call. Even while attending a meeting with the other teachers, he could not stop checking his phone. It was already evening when Alden finally called. Although the professor had barely eaten or rested all day because of worry, he still pretended to be angry before asking what had happened. Alden explained that the phone call he had received the previous night had come from the nursing home where his father was staying. His father had suddenly gone missing, but Alden eventually found him in a distant province. Because he had to take care of his father, he would no longer be able to continue writing for Mr. Rivera. He also said that he could not explain the entire secret of Arjo's family over the phone because it was far too long and detailed. They agreed that within a week, he would send the complete story by email instead. At last, the email that Mr. Rivera had been eagerly awaiting finally arrived. Filled with anticipation, he immediately dismissed his class early for a break. It was the first time he had ever done such a thing, leaving his students both surprised and delighted. As soon as he sat down at his desk, he opened the email and began reading the truth he had long wanted to uncover. He learned that Arjo's mother had known for a long time about her husband's repeated affairs with different women. Even so, she pretended not to know in order to keep their family together and provide a stable future for their 2 children. But everything changed when she discovered that her husband had developed a special relationship with the housekeeper, and that it was happening inside their own home. She could not accept it and was forced to take sedatives. One day, she found her own scarf inside the housekeeper's pocket. At the same time, she also discovered a pregnancy test with 2 lines. When the housekeeper caught her, she immediately accused her of stealing the scarf in order to drive her out of the house. However, the following day, the housekeeper herself asked to speak with her about the pregnancy test. She asked the housekeeper directly what she intended to do about her pregnancy. Instead of being frightened, the housekeeper simply laughed and said, "The child I'm carrying is not your husband's. It's true that I wanted to find a wealthy man to marry, but I despise a filthy man like your husband." After that, she went on to reveal Christopher's many disgraceful and cruel deeds, including his theft of another person's literary work. That was all Alden knew. Meanwhile, Mr. Rivera was deeply shaken by those revelations. Even though his wife had become furious because he had been ignoring her, he failed to notice. His entire focus remained fixed on the story. He repeatedly tried to call Alden to hear the rest of it, but every call was interrupted because Alden was busy. From the housekeeper's perspective, everything had begun with her older sister, who had died of cancer the previous year. Her sister had dreamed of becoming a writer. While sorting through her late sister's belongings, the housekeeper discovered the manuscript of a novel titled Guests in the Night. Out of curiosity, she read the entire manuscript and realized that her sister had written an extraordinary story. She thought that if she could send it to a publisher and earn royalties from it, she and her child might finally escape poverty and build a better life. However, because she knew nothing about copyright or the publishing process, she sought help from the famous writer Christopher. She gave him the manuscript and asked him to help register the copyright and submit it to a publisher. Christopher accepted the manuscript, but afterward he kept making excuses, claiming that he was too busy and had no time to help. When the housekeeper asked him to simply return the manuscript so she could show it to another writer, Christopher claimed that he no longer remembered where he had put it. Time passed, and when Christopher published his novel The House with Eyes, the housekeeper discovered that it was the very same story her late sister had written. Because of that, she took the book and confronted Christopher face to face. Christopher immediately denied everything. He insisted that he had never received any manuscript from the housekeeper and claimed that he himself had written the novel The House with Eyes. He even threatened that if she reported him, he would file a complaint against her instead. However, when the housekeeper revealed her trump card and said that she possessed the original file of the novel written by her sister, Christopher suddenly became afraid. From that moment on, the housekeeper held power over him. When the housekeeper was eventually forced to leave Christopher's family home, she stormed out in the pouring rain, furious. Before leaving for good, she declared that she would expose Christopher and destroy his entire family. Consumed by rage, Christopher dragged the housekeeper into the garage and tried to strangle her. Fortunately, she managed to escape. When Natalie heard the whole story, She immediately offered the housekeeper a huge sum of money in exchange for the original file of the novel. After seeing the amount written on the check, the housekeeper agreed. They arranged to meet on Monday so she could hand over the file in exchange for the money. But before Monday arrived, Natalie received the news on Sunday that the housekeeper had already died. Because of this, she suspected that her husband had killed the woman to silence her forever. She immediately put on her son's clothes and went to the hotel where the accident had occurred to search for evidence. However, according to the hotel employees, it had simply been an accident, and they had seen no signs of foul play. Afterward, Natalie went to the orphanage where the housekeeper's adopted child was living. The director told her that they had already located the child's family in America. Natalie immediately took care of all the expenses to send the child to America, so the child could be reunited with the biological family. After that, she spoke privately with the child. At last, the child trusted her and handed over the USB drive that the housekeeper had left behind. But in order to protect her family's name, Natalie made a decision even crueler than her husband's. To preserve the false happiness of their family, she cast aside her own morality and threw the USB drive into the fire. When this story reached Mr. Rivera, he gave a bitter smile. Christopher, the writer who had always been praised and compared to others as a genius, turned out to be nothing more than an ordinary plagiarist. Meanwhile, the woman Mr. Rivera had secretly loved had become someone who sacrificed her own morality to protect her family. Mr. Rivera learned that Christopher and Natalie were supposed to attend Thomas's press conference that day. Because of this, he immediately brought his wife with him. But when they arrived, they discovered that the couple would not be attending. Meanwhile, Alden continued sending the latest chapters of the family's dark story to Mr. Rivera. After burning the USB drive, Natalie believed that everything had finally come to an end. However, she never expected that her youngest child would uncover an even darker truth. Because Arjo had become suspicious of his father's relationship with the housekeeper, he secretly followed them and witnessed the accident. He saw that the housekeeper's finger was still moving, so he immediately followed the ambulance to the hospital. But by the time he arrived, she was already dead. While at the hospital, he noticed a suspicious person leaving the housekeeper's room. He chased after the individual, but when he reached the exit, he saw his father's car driving past. After hearing her son's story, Natalie immediately burst into tears. She had tried to hide everything to protect her children, but she never imagined that her son had already known the entire truth. She was even more heartbroken to learn that he had been carrying that heavy secret by himself for so long. Because of this, the mother and son decided to hold Christopher accountable. They were the ones who had sent the letter. Natalie was supposed to meet Christopher at the park, while Arjo would go to the hospital to check the CCTV footage and find out what had really happened to the housekeeper. However, while they were carrying out their plan, Christopher had just arrived at the station when he received a call from his daughter. She told him that Arjo already knew all of his secrets. Upon hearing that, Christopher immediately rushed home to confront his son. Natalie followed him, but Alden stopped her along the way. After Alden persuaded her, Natalie told him the entire truth. She also explained that when Arjo arrived at the hospital, he found nothing on the CCTV footage because the housekeeper's hospital bed had been located in the camera's blind spot. The USB drive would have been the only solid piece of evidence against Christopher, but she herself had burned it. Even now, she deeply regretted that decision. After hearing everything, Mr. Rivera promised that he would do everything he could to save Natalie. That night, he immediately called Alden and told him that they would create the evidence against Christopher themselves. According to the plan, they would claim that on the night of the incident, Alden had followed the ambulance to the hospital and personally witnessed Christopher strangling the housekeeper. Alden objected to the plan. He insisted that he could never accept a twisted version of the truth. But Mr. Rivera firmly declared that it was the truth, even if no one else had witnessed it. Despite Mr. Rivera's stubbornness, Alden reminded him of the lesson he himself had once taught: never judge based on only one side of the story. One must first look at the whole picture and examine every angle of what has happened. He asked why the professor was now acting against the very principles he had taught. Mr. Rivera remained silent. The silence between them grew even heavier. At that moment, the professor's mind had been completely consumed by his desire to expose Christopher's true nature. He no longer had any room to consider another point of view. Alden bluntly told him that he would no longer write the ending of the story. If you want an ending, then you write it yourself. After saying those words, he hung up the phone. Mr. Rivera was furious. He felt like destroying everything around him. Christopher's cruel words from the past echoed in his mind once again. The more he remembered them, the angrier and more restless he became. In the end, he sat down and wrote the ending of Alden's novel about Christopher's family himself. He became so absorbed in writing that he eventually fell asleep at his desk. He titled the completed manuscript notes from the end of the page. He was filled with satisfaction. He believed he had completed a work that might become the greatest legacy of his life. He thought it would be the second great masterpiece he had ever created. But everything changed after another phone call from Alden. Alden said that while the professor had been asleep the previous night, he had missed a call from Arjo. When Alden returned the call, no one answered. After listening to the voice recording that Arjo had sent, Alden became so frightened that he hid in the bathroom. In the recording, Arjo could be heard saying that his father was trying to hurt both him and his mother. A moment later, the sound of a door crashing open could be heard. According to Arjo, his father had completely lost control and was approaching them while holding a trophy. The last thing heard in the recording was Arjo's loud scream. Because Alden was in a distant province taking care of his father, he could do nothing to help his friend. He said that if he had been at the house, both of them might have been harmed. He decided to return immediately to save Arjo, but he feared that it might already be too late. So he begged Mr. Rivera to go to Christopher's house first and check on the situation. The moment the call ended, Mr. Rivera jumped into his car and sped toward Christopher's house. As he drove, one terrifying scene after another filled his imagination. In his mind, Natalie was lying unconscious on the floor. He also imagined Christopher pouring gasoline throughout the house before lighting a lighter. Natalie woke up because of the smell of gasoline. She crawled toward her husband, repeatedly asking where their son was. When she saw Arjo standing beside his father, she tightly grabbed her husband's leg and screamed. She demanded to know why he had hurt their own child. Christopher replied that because his son had secretly been investigating him. This was his punishment. After saying that, he shoved his wife aside, set the house on fire, and strangled her to make sure she could do nothing more. But then Mr. Rivera suddenly realized that everything had existed only in his imagination. Overcome with panic, he immediately called the fire department while continuing to drive. He even ran a red light without stopping, causing the police to pursue him. Instead of pulling over, he accelerated even more until he reached Christopher's house. When he arrived, the firefighters were already there. He immediately ordered them to break down the door and rescue the people inside. However, the firefighters told him that there was no fire and that they had already inspected the entire house. Mr. Rivera refused to believe them. When he saw the police officers, he repeatedly shouted that Christopher was a murderer. But no one believed him. When the officers realized that he no longer seemed to be in his right mind, they immediately restrained him. A few moments later, the three members of Christopher's family walked out of the house completely safe and without a single injury. Mr. Rivera stood frozen. He could no longer understand what was truly happening. Since Christopher's family agreed to settle the matter, the police released him as well. On his way home, he angrily called Alden, but Alden did not answer. The following day, when he arrived at the university, he saw Alden on campus. But when their eyes met, Alden simply smiled as though he were hiding a secret before quickly running away. Not long afterward, he disappeared completely from Mr. Rivera's sight. When Mr. Rivera returned home, he found Victoria packing her belongings, as though she were preparing to leave. When he noticed two sets of dishes on the table, he guessed that Alden had come to visit. He entered their bedroom and noticed that the blanket on the bed was in disarray. Overwhelmed by confusion and suspicion, he began to wonder whether something had happened between Victoria and Alden. Victoria then revealed that Alden had indeed come looking for Mr. Rivera. He told her the entire truth about their private literature classes. According to Alden, Mr. Rivera had never truly intended to nurture his talent. His real purpose had been to use him to obtain stories about the family of his first love. From Alden's account, Victoria realized that the man she had lived with for so many years had never truly loved her. She had always believed that her husband's coldness was simply part of his personality, so she patiently endured it. But now she understood that the warmest and most precious part of his heart had been reserved for another woman, his first love. Because of this, she no longer wanted to continue living under the same roof as Mr. Rivera. While the professor was overwhelmed with sorrow, another piece of bad news arrived. Thomas called to inform him that a post criticizing Mr. Rivera had appeared on the school's online forum. He was accused of stealing the programming contest questions to help his student. He was also accused of forcing Alden to write a novel to destroy Christopher's reputation. The post further claimed that the novel would soon be released as evidence. Mr. Rivera immediately rushed to the room where he had hidden the manuscript, but it was gone. He tried calling Alden, only to discover that his number had already been blocked. Before long, the controversy reached a local news website. When he arrived at the university, nearly everyone was staring at him. Some people even threw pieces of paper at him and called him trash. Eventually, he was summoned before the university's disciplinary board. The only explanation he could offer was that he had been deceived by his student. He insisted that Alden had been the one telling him stories about Christopher's family. However, the disciplinary board informed him that Alden had actually been suspended from the university long ago. Although there was still no concrete evidence regarding the novel intended to defame Christopher, there was undeniable proof that Mr. Rivera had stolen the programming contest questions. He could no longer deny it. Out of respect for his many years of service to the university, he was not charged with a criminal offense. Nevertheless, he was forced to resign from his position. In a single moment, he lost his wife, his job, and his reputation. That night, Alden suddenly contacted him. He sent an email revealing what had truly happened 12 years earlier. Alden explained that Victoria had once persuaded him to visit a welfare institution. At first, Mr. Rivera had not wanted to go, but his wife had told him it would be a good opportunity to relax and find inspiration for his writing. While attending a seminar there, Mr. Rivera noticed a young boy sitting in the last row of the room, seemingly indifferent to everything around him. He followed the boy outside and struck up a conversation. The boy was only 8 years old, yet he seemed far more mature than other children his age. Because of Mr. Rivera's skill in talking to people, he encouraged the child to speak about his family. That child was Alden. After their conversation, Alden approached Victoria and asked for the couple's home address. He said he had enjoyed talking with Mr. Rivera so much that he wanted to write to him from time to time. But when Mr. Rivera found out, he became furious. He blamed his wife for interfering. At first, he had thought the boy's story was unusual and full of inspiration, which was the only reason he had approached him. However, when he discovered that it was simply about the deaths of the boy's parents in a truck accident, his family's poverty, and the ordinary tragedies of life, he completely lost interest and no longer wanted anything to do with the child. What he did not know was that Alden had overheard every cold word he had spoken. That day, he wounded the heart of a young boy who had only been searching for someone willing to listen. The wound left by that moment became a trauma that Alden carried into adulthood. It was also the reason he worked so hard to enroll at the same university. From that day forward, he was determined to take revenge on Mr. Rivera. At the beginning of the new semester, Alden noticed Arjo. By chance, he overheard that Mr. Rivera and Christopher had once been close friends during their college years. Both had loved Arjo's mother, but she had ultimately chosen Christopher. With his sharp mind, Alden immediately realized that this was the perfect way to manipulate the professor. And that was exactly what happened. Little by little, he drew closer to Mr. Rivera. Through his remarkable storytelling ability, he quickly planted the suspicion in the professor's mind that Christopher was having an affair with a housekeeper, even though no such housekeeper existed at the beginning of his story. Then fate seemed to cooperate when a traffic accident occurred right in front of Mr. Rivera. Christopher also happened to be there. Alden immediately seized the opportunity and claimed that the woman involved in the accident was Christopher's mistress, who happened to be the family's housekeeper. In reality, she was only an editor at Christopher's publishing office. By the time Mr. Rivera approached Alden at the convenience store, the student already knew that the professor had completely fallen into his trap. From that moment on, Alden no longer needed to do anything. Mr. Rivera's own jealousy, anger, and imagination carried the story forward by themselves. Through nothing more than text messages and phone calls with Alden, Mr. Rivera continued writing the story about Christopher's family, basing it entirely on his own imagination and jealousy. When the manuscript was finished, only Mr. Rivera's name appeared as the author. Alden's name was not mentioned at all. It was proof that he wanted to claim the entire story as his own work. Now that he knew everything had been fiction and that he had fallen into his own student's trap, overwhelming regret consumed Mr. Rivera. He realized that he himself had slowly descended into madness because of his own suspicions. All his life, he had dreamed of creating a masterpiece that would be remembered forever. Yet, after decades of being a writer, he had never produced another successful novel. In the end, the only part of the entire story that had been true was that Alden had returned to his hometown to take care of his father. The one who truly benefited from everything that had happened was Alden, because he had successfully carried out his revenge against the man who had once looked down on him. Meanwhile, Mr. Rivera, once a respected professor, had lost all of his honor and reputation. In the end, he was forced to work as a librarian to make a living. One day, a man came to borrow a book. Mr. Rivera did not even look at him. He simply glanced at the book in the man's hands and quoted the rental fee. When the man spoke, the professor was startled. Slowly, he raised his head. It was Alden. But he had not come to apologize or forgive his former teacher. Instead, he had come to enroll once again in their private literature class because he had another new story he wanted to write. And that is where our series comes to an end. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.